see it from here, but it is one of the ones that's going across the screen right now. The GOOD, Gladstone Commercial Corporation. That's the one that we had invested in this week, and you need to invest in that one by uh, Thursday because the ex dividend date is Friday. So we have to, or the ex dividend date is the 23rd. So that's the way it is. So we need to get in there, get it done, and by the end of the week, if you don't have it, then we're going to trade away from it for the upcoming week, and that's when we're going to start talking about all of the financial pressures that we're going to be putting down. But we're making money make money for us because when we started off investing at the beginning, February of 2025, and we made more money back in returns than what we started with. So proving that you can make well over 100% return on your investment, meaning that you double your money. If you started with 1,000, by the end, you would have 1,000. 1,000 more, actually, not just 1,000. You have 1,000 more. So if you started with 1,000, including your principal, you would have 2,000. If you started with 10,000, including your principal, you would have 20,000. So when we were able to double our money, I was excited that at least in the current economy on the upswing, dividend rotation strategy does work for you. It gets taxed regularly, so it's not your bestest of best friends, but you're making more money than what the 3% comes out of your taxation does, and it does allow you to have a little bit more capital towards expediting growth. Now, you can also do buy and holds, which could fall into that special tax range where you don't have the taxation on certain items, but it all depends on what you do and how you do it. So you notice that if you're going to report your taxes, you got to make sure that you report your stock options on your taxes. So if you're going to report your taxes, you got to go ahead and get that started because, news, January 26th is when tax season starts. So if you started putting together your TurboTax and getting your tips together and getting your overtime hours together, they're going to accept the first applications January 26th. So if you're trying to get in there with very little problems, you can get in there right before the shutdown happens because they have not finished the rest of the budget. And if they don't finish the rest of the budget by the 30th, we might have yet another shutdown. So, but it'll be a partial shutdown because they have passed a few bills but not enough of them to say that the full budget is already done. So, individuals who are trying to make themselves with less stress in their lives, you probably want to move towards that. And that's one of the reasons why I encourage you guys to come through at the top of the hour, because within the first 15 minutes of the show, usually I'm giving you guys updates, tips, tricks, heads ups on things that's coming that is not directly related to the current full-on topic, but it is stuff that you guys need to know. I also put this information into the membership. So for those individuals that join the membership, you'll find yourselves enjoying a lot more information flowing because I will be actually just setting up a reoccurring quantity of just like information dumps, due dates, everything to that effect to let everybody know what's going on so that they don't forget that there's a lot of stuff pending and they're capable of getting that knowledge. Now, any information that I provide you guys on the show, outside of getting it in the membership, you can also send me a message on that, then I can provide that to you. So like I was able to give Steven that marketplace number so that he could utilize that to try to see if he can get himself some cheaper or completely free health insurance coverage and benefiting people all the way around. If I find out about it and I know that people can benefit from it, I'm going to talk about it. So most of our topics that are tuned here, special shout out to those of you that's watching us from Twitter and Twitch. Most of the topics that we cover here are strictly tuned to the ability for it to impact your finances, impact your wealth. So, and the reason why that's important is because society has fundamentally made that the number one priority is your wealth. So I'm going to help you guys out with that. I'm going to make sure that you guys know the things that you need to know to make sure that you're not wasting your efforts in generating that wealth. And with that, I just want you guys to picture this because, this situation, it starts with a phone call, the kind that every working parent dreads. Your daycare is listed, or even its future is at risk. No one ever wants to hear this kind of information, right? the subsidies that makes it possible for you to work and provide for your family, it's been put on hold. Why? Well, it's a bureaucratic fight that's happening hundreds of miles away from most of us, and some of us it's in their backyards over in Washington, D.C. Across the country, essential services are flickering out. There has been a freeze on federal funds that is threatening to shut things down, creating a vortex of chaos, just about as bad, if not worse, than the Department of Education being shut down, that is pulling everyday people into its center. Now, while Washington, D.C. threatens to turn off the lights for communities, freezing money for everything from daycare centers to local jobs, one state is writing a totally different story. So forget what you think about what you know about the heartland. This isn't about just getting by. We're talking about a decade of incredible growth. So it's all thanks to a smart, forward-thinking strategy, which is how Kansas is pouring millions of dollars back into its people by providing that service while DC is creating crisis. Now, this is all quietly happening behind the scenes because we have this very powerful dynamic where everybody's still in the uproar about Venezuela being conquered, and then the protesters, and then ICE agents, and the murders, and now they're doing the door-to-door raids. And I asked myself, while they're kicking down doors and kidnapping people, what the fuck were they? They're just now kicking down doors, apparently talking about some going door-to-door situation. Come to my door, that'll be the last day I go on air. Because I'm not opening the door, and if the door opens on its own, it's going down. But the thought process is that before they just recently started knocking on doors and kicking doors down, what were they doing? Just riding through the streets? So, which also means they weren't actually working, and they were terrorizing the neighborhoods, and no justification for that. That all of this stuff is happening while on January 6th, the United States Department of Health and Human Services dropped that bombshell, and they're citing major concerns over financial fraud, where the agencies for the Administration for Children and Families, or ACF, took the drastic step of freezing critical federal grant funds for 5 specific Democratic-led states, which is going to make every political activist scream, "See, I told you Democrats are idiots." But Democrats ain't the reason why y'all getting shot at in Memphis. California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. If you're living in those states, you're about to be sadly disappointed. And this wasn't a minor hiccup. It was a full-on financial blockade. It is stopping over $10 billion in federal aid funds from reaching the people who essentially would need it. This is almost like shades of Hurricane Katrina, where all of that money was being donated to help the people in Louisiana, and Louisiana didn't get it, while Sarah Palin was in Texas buying shoes. FEMA trailers all up and down the Texas highway on the side of the main interstate in the middle of nowhere, and American people homeless. While at that same time, $13 million a week, they were rebuilding Iraq. Yeah. Republicans were in office in that year too. Just saying. But let's break down what this really means, though. The freeze hit 3 of the most vital programs that makes up social safety nets. First, the Child Care and Development Funds, CCDF, which accounts for nearly $2.4 billion of the frozen money. This is going to be the main federal programs that are helping low-income families afford child care so that they can go to work. Without it, the cost becomes a brick wall for millions of Americans. Before I get to the second one, this is one of the reasons why I talked about last week, that because we got 2 more years of this, and we are currently in a country where if you don't make it, the government's not going to give it to you. We need to change the way we do things and stop being dependent on government funds and start being dependent on ourselves. And that requires us as individuals to start making better financial decisions. So we need to start taking more of our money, and instead of living a life of rally and partying it up like it's 1999, and we need to start putting that money in places where our money is making more money for us, so that when we end up in situations where children are born that we didn't plan and we need stuff, we don't have to depend on government funds to pay for our child care, pay for our daycare, pay for diapers, bottles, or whatever, the Colt 45 and 2 zigzags that we need to get past the child teeth, and whatever we need, we should be able to get that from our own savings and investing. And likewise, while all the women in the world are angry about the abortion thing, y'all could literally take all of your eggs, put them on ice, get a hysterectomy, and never have to worry about having children again, or at least not for another 10 to 15 years. And you would not have accidental pregnancies. And then when you're 45 years old and you decide to be a mother, you can get you a surrogate and have the child then. Be more responsible, know what you want, know how to handle things, and still be able to be a mother without having to put your own life in danger. And all of this technology that we have in play, you still got to recognize that putting sperm and semen on ice is going to cost money, and it has to be added to the budget, and not everybody can afford to do that. So you have to plan these things before you start wilding out. You have to start planning things, and it is more responsible. I'm phenomenally, fantastically excited about the fact that the largest majority of my channel is over the age of 35, because that shows me that right after you fucked up your life, you realize that change is needed, and now you're coming here and you're learning how to get it happening. But it would make me a lot more proud to see the people 18 to 35 here learning this stuff before they hit that brick wall, before the school of hard knocks graduates them into a life of chaos and turmoil, because then they would be able to avoid some of the pitfalls that the rest of us went through, so that they can have a less stressful and less catastrophic lifestyle. But because everybody is living from paycheck to paycheck, and every time their paycheck gives them a blanket of money extra above and beyond their bills, they either upgrade their standard of living, buy new cars, buy bigger houses, or they start buying more expensive stuff. Anything from buying more expensive meats and dairies and everything like that. And you go from spam and bologna sandwiches to steak and lobster in the house because you can afford it. You go from Payless and Burlington Coat Factory to going to the mall and buying everything brand new, top of the line name brand. You go from regular to upscale, and your standard of living cost more, even though your paycheck makes more. You spend more, so you still don't have shit after your paycheck is gone. And that's one of the reasons why he said this was never the intention. But that's what's happening. That's what's happening. So if we put our money in the right place, then we would have more money when we need it. I'm not saying that you gotta, live off of tuna fish for the rest of your adult life, but at the end of the day, when things unexpected happen, if you don't have a block of cash sitting somewhere to cover the spread, you're kind of fucking up. If you're at the bar hanging out, having a good time with your homies, because you're spending what could very well save you down the line from some unexpected situations. Tell me about it. Economics 101 doesn't apply anymore. Why do we not have Economics 101 in high school? We should have Economics 101 in high school. It's too bad this show isn't called Economics 101, but we're going to teach it to you like it's Economics 101, because truth be told, if we had more positive decision making financially, we would have less bullshit happening in our households, because a lot of the relationships fall apart due to financial strain and disagreements about money. Okay, so you're talking about is price gouging. Now, okay, here's one of the things that happens with price gouging. It's supply and demand. They identify it as inflation, but I do agree with you. Inflation only happens because people are willing to spend more money to make shit happen. For the sake of self ego, I want to be the first one with it. So I will pay $200,000 for an item that everybody else is going to end up paying $20,000 for once it becomes mainstream, so that I can say I was the first one with it. You also have individuals that are willing to say, okay, I'm gonna wait in line for 5 hours for the store to open so I can be the first one with it. You know, then you have individuals that are willing to take their last dollar and put on it. You realize that when there is a certain supply, like those Donald Trump shoes during election, they were limited in supply. You put out 1,000 shoes in a market with at least 150 million Americans that would have wanted that shoe. The demand brought those less than $50 pair of shoes valued to upward of $400+ in a Walmart, being sold for $9,000 on eBay because of the demand. And then the reason why prices are going up is because people are willing to pay that price, because it is only worth what other people are willing to pay for it. So take the new model cars that are coming out after the tariffs happen. They're going up by $10,000 to $15,000 per make and model. Doesn't matter which one it is. If you buy a 2025 model, it's going to cost $10,000 to $15,000 more than a 2024 or 2023 with the same quantity of miles on it. Not because it's 1 year newer, but because the tariffs on the import export parts are going to offset onto the customer. So you end up in a situation where the same Toyota Corolla, the same Toyota Camry that you used to be able to get for $15,000, you're going to get it for $25,000 or $28,000. Now, if Americans were to put their money where their mouth is, instead of paying $25,000 for that Toyota Camry, they should go and spend $15,000 on the 2022 model and buy that bad boy cash up front and not have to finance. Instead of putting $15,000 down on the car and then finance it for 7 years. You know, if you stop, and we're gonna get to these comments. He said, yes, sir. Skip food and skip basic necessities and buy the latest game system, the latest iPhone. They got cell phones. There is a law that prohibits the sale of cell phones over $700 in the United States, but they're priced at almost $2,000 in the United States, specifically because an American will pay $2,000 to get that phone. So what your phone company will do is no contract. They will give you the phone for the $600 that you're supposed to be able to pay for the phone, and then they're going to put the rest of it on an installment plan where you're leasing the usage of the phone after you paid for the phone, so that you're contractually obligated to stay with them on unofficial contract for 2 years to pay off the phone, because otherwise you owe them the rest of that money as soon as you terminate the service with them. Wow. But if you look at the laws, the phone is not supposed to be sold in America for over $700 or $800. But they get away with it because people are willing to pay for that new iPhone 16 for $16,995. Makes no damn sense. He says, buy other things equivalent in quality as close as possible. That's right. And get something cheaper. Cost comparison. What is that? Because my glasses are blurry right now. It says Pendleton shirt. Oh yeah, 179 to 200. $3 difference. Unless you're rich, the new car is a waste of money. Even first of all, the logic of rich people is specifically that you're not supposed to waste your money on cars, because cars are depreciative assets. Actually, what you're supposed to do with the car is you're supposed to lease it under the business so that the business gets a tax write-off for the purchase of the car. And then the profits that are made off of the business's sales is going to pay for the car. You end up essentially getting a free car because you work for the business, and any amenities under the business, houses, cars, cell phones, all of that stuff that's for the business are business expenses. So if you have an LLC or a C corporation that is making more money than you spend and your overhead is covered into the business, you can write a lot of that shit off. But people don't do that. Most people want to finance their car. The deed is in their name, but the car is leveraged against the debt that they borrow from the bank. He said, I'm going to get an iPhone 11. Shoot, right now I got the S23 Ultra and I don't plan on trading up. Make sure you like and subscribe as you come through. Every new car is a waste of money. Exactly. Which is an old yippee trick from the 80s. Bro, I have a 2008 Cadillac and a 2003 Chrysler 300. And I don't need shit. I put a solar panel on the dashboard to recharge the battery, and I said, fuck it. Doing nothing else. I ain't doing nothing else. You say never lease a car. And actually, no, Michael, you lease a car when you're leasing it under a business. And the reason why you lease a car is because in the leasing contract, the majority of the repairs for the vehicle is covered under the monthly payments. So while the car is being leased, you're not paying for repairs, which is different from while the car is being bought, you are paying for repairs. So instead of buying the car and having to pay to fix it and also pay for the interest on having the car, you lease the car and then you don't have to fix it. When something happens and you don't like it, you give it back. It's almost like a rent-a-car, you know what I mean? But it's it's unlimited mileage and fixed monthly payments. You know, if you got to go somewhere, if you're going to get a newer car, you lease it, you don't buy it. Okay. Unless you have the cash up front to pay for it, but it's still a depreciative asset. But you pay for it under the business expense, and the tax deductions that you get from that saves you money on taxation from profits that you made, where you ultimately, like I said earlier, you're not paying for. You know, I know a lot of people who stupidly lease cars and trucks privately. And that's the part that makes it sense. Privately. That's the stupid part. They're not supposed to do it like that. Why the ridiculous question? First of all, okay, the tie is not short, son. Young man, you got to learn how to wear a tie. This is a tie clip. And the tie actually goes down to my belly button. So, I mean, it ain't short. But I appreciate the fact that you're learning how to dress like an adult. We don't do clip-on ties. And we don't have skinny ties that go all the way down to our dick. That's overcompensating. It is supposed to be at your midsection. Okay. And the tie actually goes below the camera. You just stop seeing the pattern. I should do a show about tying ties because not everybody knows about that. Not everybody knows because the men were the ones who learned how to tie ties. Guess what? The ladies, guess who helped men who didn't know how to tie their ties? Their wives. Guess who taught the sons how to tie the ties? The good wives. What do we have missing in our world these days? Good wives. And what do we have now? Men who don't know how to tie ties. We try, we get it halfway there, and then our wife fixes our tie for us before we go out so that we don't look bad. We don't have that anymore. We miss that. Those are the things that made women valuable. We don't see that kind of stuff anymore. He said there's a very limited fix for free stipulation. Right, but in that fix for free stipulation that you have on the vehicles is the fact that if problems start happening to the car that are starting to go above the regular maintenance, you give it back. You don't just hold on to the car. You don't park a car that you're leasing in the yard and wait until you can afford to fix it. You just get that bitch back. Like, I don't want it anymore. How difficult is it to prove to the IRS that you need a car for business as an expense? Actually, there is a stipulation, and this is the stipulation. It has to be more than a half ton. That's why you're starting to see all these SUVs out there. An SUV or a really heavy car or trucks, really big vehicles, are considered by weight, not by make and model, by weight as a work vehicle. So it doesn't matter what kind of vehicle it is. It could be a fucking G4. It doesn't matter what it is. Range Rover, Hummer, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's heavy, it can be considered a work vehicle. As long as the largest majority of the vehicle's usage is claimed for work purposes. If the vehicle is only used to commute the employees from one business meeting to the next business meeting for the job, if it is used to go from one client to the next client for the job, it is a work vehicle. If it's being used to carry your kid to school and carry your wife to the doctor, it is a personal vehicle. Now, in your taxation, you do have the ability to claim the difference between work and personal, where it's some like 70-30, 50-50, whatever the case may be, where not all the miles of the vehicle was used for work purposes, but the portion of it that was used for work purposes is tax deductible. The portion of it that's not used for work purposes, not so much so. But it isn't that hard. But you can't tell me that a Hellcat with a Scat Pack is a work vehicle. But a Lamborghini is heavy as fuck and could potentially qualify. You know, a Honda Civic, not so much so by weight. A Toyota Camry, not so much so by weight. You know, but you get you one of them heavy ass Tesla trucks or something like that. Yeah, that might work. But if you get a clip-on bow tie, Michael, that's not, because if you get a regular bow tie, you still got to know how to tie a tie. But a clip-on bow tie is a little bit difficult. Or if you don't get the clip-on bow tie, it's going to be a little bit difficult to learn how to tie that tie. It's the simple act of kindness when our wives fix our ties. I know, and it was that same act of kindness that we followed through with by, let me carry that for you, let me get the door for you, let me hold an umbrella for you, let me carry you over that water puddle, let me stand in front of this car and get wet for you. The kindness stopped with feminism. He says, so you have to keep the mileage logs. Technically, yes. If you're going to be specific, you have to keep the mileage logs. However, if the vehicle is only done for work, all you're looking at is what was the mileage at the beginning of the year, and then go check the odometer at the end of the year. What's the mileage now? If you look at what the mileage was the last time you filed taxes, January of last year, and then you look at what the mileage is today, if it was all done for work, if you put 75,000 miles on a vehicle, you put 75,000 miles on a vehicle for work. But if you're splitting the difference and you're doing per miles for personal and then you're doing per miles for work, then yes, you need to keep a mileage log and itemize the separation between business and professional, so that you don't have to worry about being audited, especially during a shutdown. Because one of the fun things about the government shutdown happening in January is that anybody who files their taxes and there are no financial discrepancies in their tax filings, don't have to worry about the skeleton crew that's processing their taxation. But anybody who has numbers that don't make sense on their tax return, those individuals are likely to get audited this year. And it's going to take a long ass time because it's, again, going to be operating on a skeleton crew. So you want to make sure that along with your overtime hours and your tips, that you're keeping the mileage logs on your vehicles. If you're using your vehicles for work, gas consumption, maintenance, repairs, and everything to that effect, all of that stuff is deductions on your vehicle, on your income for your business. So if you have an LLC that you started up and you're making money off of that LLC and you're claiming all of this stuff and claiming your wife and kids as employees, you get a lot of stuff going on if you do it right. But I always recommend that you guys go and talk to a CPA or a licensed a licensed IRS agent that could help you guys with getting that information to the letter correctly. And I always know somebody who can hook you up. So there is always another scenario where if you need some questions, answers, or and then if you tell Joe Mastrino, because he does taxation on a regular basis, that this and that sent you, he'll give you 10% off. So if you're ever trying to get your taxes knocked out right, I always know a guy. I know I helped a buddy of mine when we did taxes last year, and I helped save him like $25,000 worth of taxation when we were knocking it out. So it's all about paying attention and doing your research, and then being honest about your reportings. So it is a lot of stuff that we need to pay attention to right now, because taxation starts, I think, next week. Tax season starts next week. He said the IRS has a chart for that. IRS has a chart for the standard expectations, but you can get that list so that you can know what applies to you and what doesn't apply to you. No, actually, it's not tax fraud. Actually, it is. You can verify it. So I'm not even going to entertain your stupidity. The fact is that you can verify with the IRS. You can verify with tax laws and CPAs about how you can benefit from deductions that do qualify for you based on the money that you're spending and what you're spending it for. And that's one of the things that a lot of people that have a business mindset starts changing the way they spend money, because instead of them buying something just because of the sake that they want it, they would buy things because they know that they will benefit from it. Like, for example, they have businesses, big and small, that'll do things like at the end of the tax season, buy all of the supplies they need for next year. Cases of paper, pencils, printers, everything that they need for the new year. And the reason why they'll buy that last year in December is because all of the supplies that they bought will be on this year's tax return, and then they'll get the tax deductions off of it. That's not tax fraud. That is actually business, because you honestly bought that for that reason, and you honestly did that with that stuff. So any idiot that jumps up and like, oh yeah, tax deductions are tax fraud. No, you don't know what you're talking about, and you really need to go and learn some stuff. And then come back and show me where it says that doesn't happen, because it happens every year. The billionaires do it, and that's the reason billionaires is because they spend money that makes the money, or they spend money that saves the money. They don't waste money on things that does not benefit them. Even when they buy something for somebody else, that's because they're networking to get into another deal that's going to put more money into their pocket. Politicians seem to know some family members as employees and pay them a lot of money. Yes, exactly. The same way the former president and his son was in business with one another, and they were doing a lot of government contracts. The fact is that if you do stuff that generates revenue for a business, you can be claimed as an employee. Okay. If you do stuff to keep the business running, even if you don't do stuff that generates revenue, because everybody down to the janitors get paid for the operations of the business. You know, the people who fix stuff in the building gets paid for the operations of the business. But you have to be able to, when you claim these people, you have to be able to claim these people legitimately in a fashion where you can show, if audited, that what you did made you that what you did, what you claimed with them, can be proven with the documents that you have on file. So you need to keep the logs, and you need to keep the ledgers. And if you're going to start claiming family members as employees, you need to show where they work for you and how much you were paying them by the hour or by the day. Because you also have 1099 subcontracted workers that get paid by the job, not by the hour. And you also have W-2 workers that get paid by the hour, and some that get paid by the job, but you pay the taxes on their behalf. You know, there's all kinds of ways that you can operate your LLC or your C corporation, but you have to be responsible about paying attention to the tax laws, because when you start reporting this, somebody's going to check. And if the numbers don't add up, you're going to be there for a while, especially after the shutdown. Now, the second very important thing that's going to be happening right now is the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Program, or TANF. It has a massive $7.35 billion withheld. TANF provides direct financial help to get families back on their feet, and they're cutting that one out. And finally, there's going to be a social services block grant, which is SSGB. And that one has an $869 million lockup as well. And it's a flexible fund states that uses for everything from protecting abused kids to supporting the elderly. All of that is being brought to a halt. HSS claimed the move was about stopping widespread fraud and misuse of taxpayer dollars. Somebody behind the scenes that's not the average American person is benefiting from the distribution of this money. The DOGE program tipped off the fact that money is not being properly allocated, and everywhere they find it, they put a stop to it. But the collateral damage in the immediate is that the individual people that used to benefit from certain programs are not going to have accessibility to the capital until the government or the employees of the government figures out where the money is going and where the money came from. So to enforce this, what they're doing is that they've activated a new nationwide system called Defend the Spend. under the new rules, the 5 targeted states, and you know that when they start with 5, they're going to spread it across to the rest of them, but they're starting with these 5, now have to submit detailed justifications and receipts for every single expense before any money is released, which is going to prevent the money from being misallocated to someone else. Because just like Lil Jimmy while behind came up here talking about tax fraud, the government does a good job of committing fraud with the American people's money. So a system that was supposed to be a partnership is now being turned into a bureaucratic nightmare overnight. And it is causing paralyzing delays in due process. This is going to interfere with updates in applications for resources. This is going to interfere with on-time distribution for monthly allocations, because as they collect this for the first year, not all of it is going to be provided readily. And that means that either none of the money will be released, or only a limited quantity of the money will be released. And it only is going to be released to the magnitude of what they can prove that they spent. So even if they did spend the money on something noble, if they can't prove it, it's not in the budget. And if it's not in the budget, guess what? They can't do it a second time because they're not getting the money to do it again. So while the state goal was accountability, the immediate effect is going to be chaos for millions of families who see these funds not as a political football, but as a lifeline to financial stability. Now, a $10 billion freeze is just an abstract number until it hits you in your pockets at your house. The reality is going to be felt in the kitchen, at the bus stop, and in the anxious quiet after a child is put to bed, thought at night. Yeah. So it's the single mom that's in Illinois who suddenly doesn't know if her child's daycare will be there next month because they can't prove where they put their money. It's going to be the family in California working 2 jobs, now facing the impossible choice between a paycheck and childcare, because they live above their means. And this is going to be true to life. They live above their means, and because they were getting money for childcare, they subsidized that into their budget instead of recognizing that since I need this much money from government assistance, we need to spend less money on other stuff and start putting that money away so that whenever this budget stops, we still got money coming in. They're not doing that. They're saying, well, if they're giving us $500 a month, or if they're giving us $1,000 a month, we got an extra $1,000 a month worth of stuff. That's not the mentality to have. You're becoming codependent on a subsidized income that isn't guaranteed to you. It is afforded to you while you financially qualify. But get the wrong raise or put in too many hours, and your budget exceeds the qualifications of that program, you're no longer getting that subsidy. If while you barely could afford it, you utilize that subsidy to expand either the resources in your household to where you have a surplus, or you take the extra capital that you don't need for that and redirect it towards generating larger quantities of wealth. When your budget does step outside of this program, you can still afford it. Or in situations where the program just gets shut down, you can still afford it. But this is a real crisis at human cost. And it is the collateral damage that we're going to have to experience in order to see some change. In Illinois, for example, there's 100,000 low-income working families that are depending on the state's child care assistance program. And that program gets a chunk of its funding from the very CCDF grants that were just frozen. So for these families, the subsidy isn't a bonus, it's a gear that makes their daily lives work. It lets them keep a job and build a path out of poverty if possible. So when you yank that gear out, the whole machine grinds to a halt. Governor J.B. Pritzker's office rightly pointed out that the decision puts the livelihood of these families directly at risk. The story is just as grim on the other side of the states. California was left with nearly $2.4 billion in the hole in its budget for programs like CalWORKs, which are designed to reduce child poverty. Now, in New York, local officials warned of devastating consequences, the devastating consequences. Predicting the freeze would make the child care crisis even worse in New York. Advocacy groups were sounding the alarms. The nonprofit 0 to 3 said the move was creating chaos across the country. I didn't feel it, but somebody's feeling it. The National Head Start Association worried that the decision would disrupt local services and harm the very families the programs were built to serve, arguing that hardworking families can't afford to be caught in a bureaucratic morass. The message was loud and clear that when you weaponize funding, you don't just punish the state government, you punish the most vulnerable people living there. But unfortunately, if you grew up in the same generation that I grew up in, you were taught the same thing that I was taught, that you don't hit them in the face, you hit them in the wallet. And what does that mean? Instead of fighting them, you take money out of their paychecks. You take money out of their savings, their investings. You take money out of their trust funds. You garnish their assets. And when you do that as a governmental power, you force control and you get obedience. Now, what does that mean for the people under the authority of those bureaucratic powers? Well, if your government, your local government, your state government is not abiding by the rules of your federal government, and your federal government pulls funding, then your state government doesn't have enough money to give you what you need. And then you don't have the resources that you're supposed to have. Now, how do you fix that as a person under that governmental power? We're in the quarterly. No, the halfway point. Now, between now and November 23rd, you're supposed to be voting for different people in different states around the United States. This is a turnover in the halfway point of the presidency. There is no reason why you can't vote in better people to make different decisions in your local government. Then you won't have this problem going forward. So while families are scrambling, the people who actually provide the child care is the small business owners and nonprofit centers where people are pushed to the edge of a financial cliff as it relates to not having enough resources to keep the doors open in some of these establishments. And most of these centers, especially those in the low income areas, run on a razor thin margin of budget. And they don't have a big cash reserve. They don't make enough to have a big cash reserve in order to keep the prices low. And they're often run by passionate educators who live and die by timely subsidies, reimbursements, and other areas of financial stimulation to make payroll and pay rent on time. Now, for these providers, a payment delay isn't an inconvenience. It's a potential death sentence for their business. As one expert noted, any delay directly impacts a provider's ability to pay their staff, which in turn affects their ability to stay open. Because if you're not getting a paycheck this week because we didn't get any money to pay you, you're probably not going to want to go to work this week. And if you can't go to work this week, you're not going to get a paycheck next time around. So when you do get your paycheck from the last 2 weeks worth of work, you probably went and found you another job because your money's been messed up for the month. When a center closes, it rips a piece of essential infrastructure out of that community. Parents can't go to work because they don't have babysitters and daycares. They don't have the financial affordabilities to pay for nannies because they haven't been putting money away to afford that. Those local businesses are going to lose hardworking employees because they have to stay at home with their kids because nobody's watching the kids, and especially the kids that aren't old enough to go to school. You have another problem here because a lot of children that are going to school and being disruptive in the school are being put into school in that fashion because nobody's watching them at home. If they had a more stable infrastructure in the household, the children would not be at school by force. They would be at school by choice, and they probably would behave a little bit better, right? And the whole local economy is going to feel these losses. Now, the new defend to spend rules are going to be demanding exhaustive paperwork before the payment is ever issued. Added a administrative burden to an already stretched out sector. They're not going to give you pretty much anything until you give them everything that you have. Now, that's going to lead to a delay, but then a budget cut. Instead of surgically targeting actual fraud, the federal action carpet bombed the whole system with innocent providers and families as collateral damage. You dropped a nuke in Times Square just to catch a roach. It makes no sense. But since Doge isn't running around auditing everybody anymore, Elon's not using his free time to watch everybody's money. At the end of the day, this is probably the most effective way for them to do it, because instead of the government combing over billions of people of information, they're going to make the government that wants the money do it. The local state that wants the money, they're going to do it. Now, there's a small glimmer of hope that appeared on January 9th of 2026 when a federal judge issued a temporary 14-day block on the freeze, ruling that the states had met the threshold to protect the status quo while the case was being argued. But this was just a breathing room situation, not a solution. The threat remains, and the cumbersome new rules were still in place nationwide, threatening slow payments for every state, not just the targeted 5. As I told you before, it's going to end up happening everywhere. The signal from DC was one of chaos and instability. But in order for you to get change, you've got to shake things up. Now, while Washington is in chaos, one state is taking a completely different path. While the federal government shows that they're going to be sowing uncertainty into the works, Kansas is methodically planting seeds of opportunity. And this isn't a story of shutdowns, but of investment and growth, which is something that you might want to look into and see if you can grab some shares in. It's going to be a powerful counter narrative showing that smart, practical governance isn't about politics, it's about getting results. Now, this isn't a lucky accident. It's the result of a deliberate plan called the Kansas Framework for Growth, the state's first real economic development strategy in over 30 years. It's a blueprint built not on reacting to daily crises, but on proactively investing in the state's current strengths to build a resilient economy. And you can't argue with the results. Since Governor Laura Kelly's administration began in 2019, Kansas has locked down more than $20 billion in private sector investments. That's not just a number on a page. It translates into real opportunities with commitments to create or retain nearly 70,000 jobs across the state. While DC argues about turning off the money spigot, Kansas has begun being busy building a pipeline of prosperity, directing resources to its people, schools, and its infrastructure. Now, when money gets tight, education is often the first thing on the chopping block. But Kansas, the thinking is the exact opposite. Investing in education isn't an expense, it is the single most important investment you can make in your current future. So, this commitment is in the front and center of Governor Laura Kelly's budget proposals for the fiscal year of 2026 2027. So, for the eighth straight year, the governor's budget fully funded K through 12 public schools as required by the state's constitution. And if the budget passes, Governor Kelly will be the first Kansas governor in the generations that we have seen to have fully funded public schools every single year of her term. That says a lot. That kind of stability lets school plan, hire teachers, and give students the resources that they need to succeed, which is a stark contrast to the chaos coming from the federal level. Now, where is the construct and the sharpeners? Then we're going to start digging into some special education areas. So for decades, and this is going to be the contrary, for decades, the federal government has broken its promise under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, leaving states to foot the bill. In Kansas, state law says the state must reimburse districts for 92% of the extra cost needed to educate a student with special needs. For years, the state fell short. The result, schools had to raid their general funds, which meant larger classes and fewer resources for all the students. But Kansas is fixing that. The proposed budget includes an additional $50.6 million just for special education state aid. And this is going to be a huge infusion of cash. And this is a major step in a multi-year plan of finally hitting that 92% funding requirement. This isn't just about a spreadsheet, because it means more special education teachers, more individualized attention for students who need it, and better resources in the classroom. And by properly funding special ed, it stops the drain on the general education budget that is freeing up money to lower class sizes and restore programs for everyone. Now, a state commitment to its future is written in concrete and steel, which is the other side of this fence. Now, while the national conversation is stuck on the crisis, Kansas is busy building, because it's a story that is now being powered by a strategic infrastructure investment as well. And this one is turning the state into a magnet for more jobs. A perfect example is going to be the state's recent investment in a freight rail network. On January 15th, 2026, the Kansas Department of Transportation, KDOT, announced it was awarding $11.2 million to 10 different freight rail projects across the state. Better yet, that public money was used to leverage an additional $5.3 million from private and local partners for a total investment of over $16.5 million. Why a rail? Because in a state driven by agriculture and manufacturing, moving goods efficiently is everything. These projects lower shipping costs, strengthen the supply chain, and take heavy trucks off of the highways. Looking at the city of Newton to see the impact, a company called GAF, North America's largest roofing manufacturer, is making a massive $400 million investment to build a new shingle plant, bringing over 130 new jobs, highly skilled jobs, to this area. But a plant that big needs to move a lot of materials. That's where the state's investment comes in at. Through the rail program, a grant of $2.06 million is helping build the new railway siding just to serve the GAF plant. And this public infrastructure is essential for the 8,000 additional rail car loads a year the plant will generate when it opens in late 2026. So we should probably see forward movement in real time in Q3 or Q4 of 2026, assuming no delays occur. It's a perfect public to private partnership. A small state investment unlocked a huge private one, creating jobs and economic activity for decades to come. And it's happening all across Kansas, because with each grant strategically placed to strengthen the state's entire economic engine, we see more and more success. Now, a society's strength is measured by how it cares for its people and plans for the future. So, in a striking contrast, the federal government's actions differ from Kansas, where Kansas is reinforcing its own safety nets instead of becoming codependent to government funding. Now, take the Food Stamp Assistance Program, SNAP. The federal government has recently made changes that put new burdens on states, including stricter work requirements and demanding states pay more for their administration, the people, and the tech that is needed to run the program. Faced with this pressure, a state could cut back the distribution of funds on a monthly basis. Governor Kelly's budget proposed a $16 million increase specifically for the SNAP administration. It's an investment in hiring more caseworkers and upgrading systems to ensure that eligible families get help without delay. And to help the state avoid massive federal fines for payment errors, it has a smart, responsible governance. Invest a little now to prevent a huge crisis later. Beyond immediate needs, Kansas is also making historic investments in its most precious long-term resource, which is water. The state's agricultural economy depends on aquifers like the Ogelia, which are under serious strain. Recognizing this, the governor's budget commits to increasing annual spending by $30 million for a total of nearly $90 million to fully fund the state water plan. Now, this money will go towards vital infrastructure for clean drinking water in small towns. This will help farmers adapt water savings technology and support efforts to clean up groundwater. This will be securing the state's future from the ground up. I tell you guys about all of this because it is ironically interesting that there are so many investment opportunities in this one state that if you know somebody who knows somebody, you can get yourself in there and make you a little bit extra money. Now, the Kansas comeback story isn't a happy accident. It is the result of a detailed strategy, because the Kansas framework from growth is going to be designed for the first time in over 30 years where the state has that forward-thinking economic plan that actually is working. Since it was put into place in 2019, the framework has helped attract over $20 billion in new private investments. And it has led commitments to create or retain nearly 70,000 jobs in 87 of the state's 105 counties. That's almost everybody. That's a big cover. I can see this lady going from being on the government level to going into the political level for the elected officials. The plan's genius is its focus. It targets 5 key sectors where Kansas can win: advanced manufacturing, aerospace, distribution, and logistics, food and agriculture, and professional services. And it's been incredibly effective. About 90% of all of the successful economic development projects since 2019 have been in one of these areas. So this isn't just about the number of jobs, but the quality of the jobs that will be there. The new positions being created pay on average 7.7% more than the statewide private sector average, which means that you're getting better paying jobs going forward. That's going to mean higher incomes for the individuals that are living there, more stable families, and more money being spent in local shops and restaurants. And the more money the household makes, the less likely the household is going to be dependent upon SNAP funds and TANF funds to subsidize the income. It's a strategy designed to lift the standard of living for everyone, creating a cycle of success that builds on itself year after year. Hearing about billions in investments naturally leads to a critical question. That's great, but can Kansas actually afford it? In an age of deficits and fiscal cliffs, it's the right question to ask. And the answer is going to be very, very clear. Yes, they can. This comeback isn't built on reckless spending. It's built on a foundation of solid, financially responsible planning. The Kelly administration has made it clear that its goal is to maintain the state's long-term financial health. And this prudent management has put Kansas in a great financial position with billions in its rainy day fund, and that's always good to have. Where this fiscal cushion is what's going to make the state's ambitious investment strategy possible. It provides the confidence to make the kind of transformative investments in schools and infrastructures that other states can only dream about. And it creates a virtuous cycle. Responsible budgeting leads to a healthier surplus, which I've been telling you on an individual basis would make you individually successful for generations to come. And look, here goes Kansas doing exactly what I was talking about doing this whole time. Those investments, like the railway project that unlocked a $400 million private investment, create new economic activity and grow the tax base. This in turn brings in more revenue and puts the state in an even stronger position for the future. It's a model of pragmatic government that prioritizes stability, growth, and well-being of its citizens. The contrast couldn't be clearer. On one side, you have the chaos of Washington, D.C., where funding for kids, families, and services is being used as a political weapon, creating fear and instability. And on the other side, you have that quiet, steady work of a state government in Kansas, and a government that is methodically investing in its people and its future. You can't beat that. So it's a story of two totally different approaches, one that manufactures crisis and one that builds prosperity. Kansas is providing that proactive local investment that is the key to a stable future, and the Sunflower State is providing a blueprint for how to thrive in an era of federal dysfunction. So, what is the story in your state? Are they building a future or just reacting to the late drama from DC? Let me know in the comment section. And if you guys believe in the power of local solutions, make sure that you take the opportunity to like and subscribe to tonight's show, because I have more information about the people that are building America's future from the ground up as we cover different areas of how politics impacts our ability to make, save, and invest money every night of the week. Specifically, we talk about this particular genre on Monday nights. So tomorrow, what we're going to be seeing is I'm going to dive into some updated ways for us to make some digital nomad capital in 2026. And then next Tuesday, we're going to be discussing our dividend rotation strategy for February. And this Wednesday and next Wednesday, we're going to be dealing with two countries near South Korea that we could potentially make, save, and invest in. And then our first Wednesday in February, we're going to be covering South Korea. With that being said, we're going to start by saying, ladies, as long as the situation doesn't make sense, I'm going to keep asking ladies to make it make sense. So ladies, please make it make sense. And then fellas, I provide y'all with this information to help you guys become higher value men by providing you with the knowledge that you need to improve your personal life as well as your business life. When you focus on the things that are inside of your control and make the changes to the things that you don't like, then you can navigate around the things that you cannot control. And ladies, while this is a male-driven podcast from the male's perspective, you too can learn how to make yourselves higher value women by restructuring your focus on the things that will benefit you in the long term, not in the immediate future. Because while the immediate future needs to be adjusted, your long-term 10-year and 20-year goals need to start being established now in 2026. Because if you weren't watching the show in 2025 and started to make changes, if you start making those changes in 2026, by 2046, you should not need for nothing, with or without a man. Plain and simple. With that being said, I want to thank you guys for coming to this and that. We actually have ourselves, I should have been rolling that all day. We actually have ourselves popping off at the close to the top of the hour. So I want to make sure that you guys take the opportunity to like and subscribe and swing back by tomorrow to see what information we've got coming to you, because I am more than positive that you guys will be able to benefit from all of the information that we have as we run the show 7 nights a week, and we don't let the sun rise without going live. So if you missed a show, you can always double back and come and get the information from the show on the replay, because we archive all of our information where you can access it just going into our channel and then clicking the information from the channel. And if you got any questions, even on a post-play show, and you put it into the comment section, I read those comments and then I get back to you guys. So if you have any questions, you have any insight, you need some information, I can provide you with that information. And any information that's not just sitting there accessible directly off of the show, it's in our membership. So you can always take a look at our membership and see what's there that you could potentially benefit from. With that being said, I want to thank you guys for coming to This and That. I'm your host, Xander, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. And I'll see you guys tomorrow night.
My network is my net worth. Choose your company wise. Surround yourself with eagles, not with sheep in disguise. Every interaction is a reflection of my brand. Quality over quantity, that's my personal command. Ground.